In this video, we will look at American pragmatism as a contrast to positivism. American pragmatism developed as a philosophical movement in the late 19th century through the work of Charles Sanders Peirce and William James particularly. As a philosophical movement, it has taken several directions, and there is no consensus among pragmatists on what constitutes its core. But as I already mentioned, American pragmatism can be understood as a reaction to modern philosophical movements such as positivism. At least it can be described as a contrast to it. American pragmatism argues that knowledge is the consequence of practices, and an understanding of the world will thus be rooted in human agency. As Peirce in particular emphasized with his pragmatic maxim, knowledge should be judged by its practical consequences. A description of reality thus has no intrinsic value, but may be useful insofar as it can solve some actual problem. It thus emphasized a form of knowledge that was rooted in practice. Positivism, on the other hand, did not have this anchoring, but saw the practical consequences as secondary to the quest of describing experience. So if truth has no value in itself, but only has value, as American pragmatists argue, in the fact that someone perceives of it as valuable, does this not relativize the concept of truth? Bertrand Russell, one of the greatest critics of American pragmatism, he criticizes it because, as he writes, it gives freedom to creative fancy, which it liberates from the shackles of the supposed real world. Russell's view of American pragmatism was thus that it legitimizes fantasies by equating them with empirical truth. However, this is a misnomer, for American pragmatism should not be equated with a form of, call it, epistemological relativism, where every perspective has the same legitimacy and value, which in turn means that no truths have any privileged legitimacy, nor should it be equated with some form of ontological relativism, where one can transform the world as one pleases by just thinking about it, even believing that one can change the laws of nature if one wanted to, as if they didn't apply to you. American pragmatism does not deny that there is a reality that can be captured and described through scientific methodology, nor should it be seen as a return to an approach that prioritizes a priori arguments. Instead, American pragmatism argues that our understanding of what is true is also rooted in social practices, power relations, narratives, and values, which should all be subject to critical scrutiny when striving towards the truth. It further implies that what is true cannot be disconnected from the culture that maintains and creates a description of what is true. An American pragmatist who has influenced my work is the American philosopher Cornel West. He accepts pragmatism's basic understanding of knowledge and rights. There is no such thing as a purely intellectual form of assertion which has no element of action about it. An opinion is a deed. It is a deed intended to guide other deeds. It proposes to have what the pragmatists call workings. That is, it undertakes to guide the life of the one who asserts the opinion. In this sense, all truth is practical. When West talks about pragmatism, he emphasizes that knowledge seeking is a social process. Fundamental to American pragmatism, according to West, is what should be described as a democratic ideal of knowledge, where knowledge is secured by the social practices of a community of inquirers rather than the purely mental activity of an individual subject. The emphasis in American pragmatism is therefore, according to him, on deliberative dialogues and its importance in seeking common truth together. West writes, pragmatism has to do with trying to conceive of knowledge, reality, and truth in such a way that it promotes the flowering and flourishing of individuality under the conditions of democracy. West's philosophy is linked to his activism for justice, which is something that Cornel West is particularly famous for. It is therefore not surprising that he emphasizes that American pragmatism is connected to notions of what is morally good, as this is a question that will be raised when you have a group of people who together seek a common truth. Thus, for West, a process that seeks a common truth cannot be separated from the question of what those involved in the process want, that is, what practical consequences they want to achieve. In contrast, positivist truth claims seek to decouple the question of the good from the question of the true, as such knowledge would not be objective. Furthermore, West argues that the relationship between the good and truth means that the truth becomes temporarily determined. The truth that one manages to obtain is bound to the time and context in which it was formulated. As West writes, pragmatism has taught us that if truth is a species of the good, and the good is defined in terms of temporal dimensions of knowledge claims, you can never claim that truth, capital T, has been arrived at. What is perceived as a truth in society may thus need to be revised if it fails to respond to the challenges and aspirations of society at the time, if it doesn't seem practical or beneficial to society in any way. This then raises questions about who currently has the power to define the challenges and aspirations of society. If truth is temporal, it risks being determined by those who have the power to define it. Thus, the consequence for society is that its narrative and practical foundations are determined by the powerful, whom West identifies as the political and economic elite. At the same time, this realization also offers an opportunity to challenge the elite's right to define truth by questioning their claims. Accordingly, when the truth is temporary, no one can claim to have final authority over it. What we can see in American pragmatism here, particularly through the thinking of Cornel West, is an emphasis on community, power, and culture in processes of gaining knowledge. The focus thus shifts from the positivist quest to be objective in the pursuit of truth to the person or persons pursuing the truth. In pragmatic thinking, the personal then becomes highly relevant. How this affects our understanding of research-based teaching and learning, we will be looking at in the next video.